Hi everyone, welcome to the second video in Informatica interview preparation series. So the first video took a little long time, but I'll just walk you through on the other set of questionnaire which is captured by my colleague. What is difference between starting a workflow from the beginning and starting a workflow from a session, right? So there are different options that you actually see within the workflow manager, and what is the difference? And I'm switching it to my VM just to show it in a practical way. See, what happens is when you actually trigger a workflow by using this option, start workflow, it starts from the beginning, which is a start button, and execute all of the sessions within your workflow. You may have any number of sessions, it executes everything, right? So that is a meaning of start workflow. If I select an option and then say start task, right? What will happen is it will execute only this session. It doesn't execute any of them within it. So I'm choosing this option, start task, right? If I say by selecting the session, start workflow from task, right? So which means it will execute this session and the dependent ones as well. So that is the difference between the three different options. Start workflow means it executes from the beginning to end. You can select the start task. It will execute only this session. When you execute start workflow from task, it will execute this session and then the depending sessions as well. So those are the three different options which you see. And the similar kind of options you will see even in the workflow monitor as well, right? So I'm just switching back to my this one. Okay. After you creating a mapping in session, how do you deploy them into production? See, if you're actually a junior developer, generally you will not involve in migrating the code, Informatica code from one repository to the other repository. But in general, there are various ways that you can actually migrate the code from one environment to other environment. One thing is by using import and export method, right? You can export and import. You can export whatever the workflow you would like to import, that you can export it and import it onto the destination repository. So I'll just show you quickly. Generally, we use a repository manager for migrating the components. Suppose, let's say I want to migrate this, okay? Or I want to, then I can just say that right click on export. It creates an XML file, right? I can choose whatever the destination folder that I have, right? I can just choose it and click on save. It exports the file into a XML file. And I can use the same XML file. I can log into my destination repository and then import it. So when you export it, right, it gives, when you export it, the workflow, all the dependent objects also get exported. When you say dependent object, workflow, worklets, sessions, mappings, transformation, source, target, everything gets exported. Okay, so all the dependent objects get exported. When you import, all the dependent objects will get imported onto the destination repository. So I'm just keeping it short. So that's the export and import. And the next one is, by using a deployment groups. There is a concept called as a deployment group within the Informatica. So there is a concept of static deployment groups and dynamic deployment groups. All of that you can use and then probably migrate it. Again, deployment groups, you can create it from a workflow manager. So I can go here to this deployment and I can create it. Okay, probably 1 second. Okay. You can create a deployment group from here. You can just create it, whether you want to create a static or a dynamic. Dynamic means at runtime, it queries the objects and migrate it. Static means you need to add whatever the mappings and sessions that you want to migrate, that you need to do it as part of that. Right. So that is about your static and dynamic deployment groups. Do you know version control? What tools you use for a version control? See, when you're actually working in Informatica project, Informatica repository is a version controlled repository, right? You can always do a check-in, check-out. Whenever you check in, it will create a new version, and whenever you check out, it basically locks the object and do it. So Informatica has an inbuilt version control mechanism. If you're while creating a repository itself, you can make Informatica as a version control repository, and whenever you do a check-in and check-out, always the version gets created, and that version control mechanism which is there. But in general, if you want to maintain outside of Informatica repository, then you can probably use the SVN, VSS, or you can even store in a GitHub as well, but you can't configure a GitHub directly to the Informatica. So what is a worklet? So worklet is a group of sessions which you want to reuse it in multiple workflows. So that is called as a worklet. So worklet generally created using a worklet designer, right? So I go here. Suppose, let's say I want to make use of these 3 sessions, make them as a reusable, and I want to use it in a multiple workflows, right? So what I can do is I can just create a worklet sample, and then you can add whatever the sessions that you want to execute, or I mean, not only sessions, you can add a command task, you can add a event wait, event rise, stop, all these workflow manager tasks you can add. And once you create a worklet, so worklets will appear here, and then you can drag and drop it into any number of workflows. So worklet is a group of tasks which can be made as reusable across the multiple workflows. That is called as a worklet. So I mean, it is more or less similar like a maplet. Maplet is designed in the designer, and whereas your worklet is actually designed in the workflow manager, right? What are the main challenges that you get to run when you're connecting to an Oracle database, right? So this is more a generic question. I mean, all we know that when you're connecting to Oracle database, you connect it using SQL developer or a Toad or a PLSQL developer, which you use. In general, you get to see the invalid username and password. That is a error that you may see, invalid username and password, which means, or sometimes if your user account is locked, it will say account is locked. That is one kind of error that you see. And then maybe your listener is not running, then TNS listener cannot connect to the TNS server or whatever the entry that you give. Whenever you connect with Oracle database, right? So always you need to know the host name, database name, or a service name, and then you need to know the port number, all of that. Those are the general things. Maybe if you have some network issues, and maybe if you're not connecting to VPN, maybe sometimes you may not be able to access the on-premise database. All of that happens. So what is the different that you do when you're importing a XML file and the flat file? See, the flat files basically in Informatica, you have 2 types, right? So one is a delimited files or a fixed width files, flat files. I mean, whenever you want to read the XML, I mean, you basically go by an XML. So it's altogether a different approach. I mean, when you're defining in the designer, right? So when you're importing a definition, so you can always use a different option. Import from file. Whenever you are talking about the CSV or a tab delimited files, you can use this option. Whenever you are importing an XML or reading a data from an XML, you need to use this option. If you're using COBOL file, probably you can go for this option. If you're importing anything from a database, you can use. So these are the different options that you have to use depending upon the type of source that you're using. So quickly, if you want to see the XML, always, anyway, I think we have covered this as part of my videos. I'm going to make that available in some time. Thanks. So let's move on. What is a session does, right? So see, session is an executable component, right? You're creating a mapping in a designer, and mapping cannot be executed. So if you want to execute a mapping, you must associate a mapping with a session. So session is an executable component which is created in a workflow manager. One session can invoke only one mapping. If there is a session S1, it can invoke only M1. Mapping one. One session can be associated only with one mapping, and one mapping can be executed by multiple sessions, right? Suppose, let's say I can create another session which probably executes the same mapping, right? You can do that. I mean, one session, but one session can invoke only one mapping. That is the session. What workflow does? Workflow is a job, right? It's a group of tasks. So basically, it's a group of tasks, like whatever the task you can call it, right? So it can be a group of sessions, maybe a command task, a workload. It can contain a workload group of tasks connected sequentially or parallelly for performing I mean, probably, and again, a set of jobs, like you can, I mean, set of sessions you can call. So workflow is more like a component which actually contains the set of tasks. So tasks are your session, command task, and workload. So what is the difference between a mapping and a maplet? So mapping is always, mapping means it must contain a source, it should contain a target and a set of transformations. So that is a mapping. You cannot create a mapping without a source and without a target, right? So you must have source, target, and set of transformations for performing the specific ETL transformation logic. So that is mapping. When you say maplet, right? Maplet is basically designed using a maplet designer. It's a group of transformation which you would like to reuse it, right? So group of transformations. So suppose, let's say you have a scenario where you want to validate the address, right? Maybe whether the address is, I mean, basically the zip code contain a special characters, or maybe the address is properly written, or an apartment or a suite number is properly available or something. So you basically want to validate the address. So for that, I can create a maplet, and I can basically reuse that maplet for validating any number of addresses that I can use it in the mapping. So it's a group of transformations which it can be used. So maplet cannot contain a target definition. You cannot have target definition within the maplet, but you can have a source. Basically, maplet uses the two different type of transformation. One is a maplet input transformation, and another is a maplet output transformation, which you can create maplet output value, but it cannot contain a. So the difference which you can call between a mapping and a maplet cannot have a target definition, whereas a mapping must contain a source and target definition. So otherwise you cannot build a mapping, right? So that is basically the high level difference between that. So what is difference between OLTP and OLAP? This may be a more generic question from your database fundamentals, right? So OLTP is more like an online transaction processing system. OLAP is your online analytical processing system, what you have. OLTP, like as I explained in my previous video, Facets is a transactional system. Maybe a Salesforce CRM is a transactional system, or maybe if your finance is using a SAP FICO for their financing purpose, that is a transactional system, right? So those are all which are used for a daily operations. OLAP is nothing but your data warehouse, which is used for an analytical purpose. So online analytical processing system, that is one. So why do you use Obie and Tableau? What it does, Obie and Tableau are more like reporting tools. Obie, it actually reads the data and represents the data in the form of a dashboards, all of that. And Tableau is again another reporting tool. Now Tableau is acquired by Salesforce, so you often see Tableau CRM from a Salesforce right now, right? So Tableau is another reporting tool. So what it does, it basically used for analyzing the data and for a reporting purpose, dashboards and all of that. So what is mapping? I think we discussed that as part of a question number 23. That is about mapping. And any more questions? Yeah, we have some more. Let's do that. What is SCD type 1 and SCD type 2? I think we discussed that in the previous video as well. SCD type 1 is more about which stores the most recent data. SCD type 2 will store the complete historical data which you use. What are some of the columns you keep to identify the most current address? If the customer has two addresses, how will you find the latest one? Maybe let me break this question, which is the previous history, right? Okay, let's take a simple example here, okay? So you have a table structure, SCD type 2 structure, something like this. Customer ID, maybe a customer name, or probably the location of the customer, maybe a phone number. Yeah, let's probably finish it, right? So And then you basically have a SED type 2 always comes with columns like start date and end date. And we will also have a current flag for capturing the latest record, right? So suppose, let's say you have a data like this, just assume, I mean, I have explained this in my training videos, but let's have the data something like this. Okay, let's say Karthik, right? And the location is, let's say, NY, and phone number is 10345. Start date, maybe the starting date is 10th March, probably 1987. And end date, by default, whenever you are inserting a record for the first time, your end date is going to be 31st December 999, right? So this is basically the way of capturing the historical data. And you say that current flag is Y, right? So suppose, let's say the Karthik is relocated from New York to Texas, right? What will happen in SED type 2? You'll have another record. Basically, the customer ID is going to be same. Maybe the name is not changed. So we'll have a Karthik, and then the location is basically Texas. Maybe if this guy has changed the phone number, you change the phone number, and he relocated to Texas probably in 11 February 2022, right? And then this will become your latest record now because he relocated. So it will become the old. I mean, this is basically the 31st December 999 is this one, what you have. And the current flag is going to be Y. This is the latest record, and we will update the old record to N. And your end date, since this guy has relocated, so this is basically, this becomes 11th Feb, because this record is actually valid. Maybe you can even call it as 10th Feb, 10th Feb 2022. So this record is valid. Now, when you have this, if somebody asks you to identify what is the latest record, you can always write a query saying that where I can go by end date. I can always say that where end date equal to 31st December 999 in my query. So I'll always get that. Or if you want to, there is another way which you want to capture. I can even write it as where current flag is equal to Y, right? So that is how you identify the latest record, and the historical record you can always identify saying that N. But if there are multiple values, then you need to probably write a different way of query to determine the the previous record. So that's how you can do it. If customer ID, I think we did discuss about it. What is a primary key for this table? Okay, see, basically whenever you are designing an SED type 2, right? If your transactional system is having a customer ID as a primary key, you can't use the same customer ID as a primary key in your data warehouse. That's why we introduce a concept of surrogate primary key, right? So customer key, this is a surrogate primary key. So for the next question, what is a primary key for this table? We will actually define a new surrogate primary key, which will be generated using a sequence, right? So that is your surrogate primary key. So how will you find the duplicate in your table? Okay, maybe I think I'll just show this practically quickly. Bear with me in opening the SQL developer, and then we'll probably see, how we can identify our duplicate records, right? So, and basically we can even understand about how do we, yeah, maybe I can just go to SDBU schema. So let me read the questionnaire, maybe select star from EMP when I run it. Okay, so let's try to see here, how do I basically find the duplicate records, maybe using a name. Do we have a duplicate records here? If I see, I do not see the duplicate records by name. Okay, maybe the word dupe, this is actually created for a different purpose. Okay, see, basically now I want to identify a duplicate records. See, identifying a duplicate records is very easy. I mean, let's say I want to identify duplicate records in the MGR. I mean, it doesn't really make sense as per the data, but I'm just taking a simple example to demonstrate this, right? I go to EMP. Now I want to know how many duplicate records are there in the manager column, MGR column, right? So when you want to do that, I can write a query like this, count star, and whichever the column that you want to identify the duplicates, you need to group it based on that. So if the in the particular column, if the data is repeated more than once, then that's a duplicate record, right? So I just say having count star greater than 1, right? So basically, if the value is repeated more than once, then I call it as a duplicate record, right? So you basically 7839 is repeated for thrice, and 7698 is repeated for 6, or 7566 is basically repeated twice. So which is more than once, so that's a duplicate. So that is how you identify a duplicate records within the so within basically identify duplicate records. How do you find top 5 salaries in the employee table? Okay, this is also a good one. So let's go to again to a SQL developer. Probably this time I'm going to use a different table. Let me check. Let me check the data in an employee table. I'm not sure if we have a salary column here. Otherwise, I don't think we have a salary column here. So probably let's try to use the EMP table itself, right? So I'm going to use the same EMP table. Now, I want to find the top 5 salaries here. If you see, okay, maybe I can just sort it out just for our understanding. Okay, I need these top 5 salaries to be displayed in my query. See, generally top 5, all of these are something that which can be determined by using a rank and dense rank, as I would have explained in my training videos, right? So I'm going to probably now, I want the top 5 salaried employees, right? So job, manager, maybe hire date, all of this, right? So any columns, like you can pull it up. There is no, there is no harm. Okay, so now I want to know the top 5 salaries, right? So I can write a rank function like this, rank, and this is a syntax. You basically get this by experience, right? So order by salary, descending order. Maybe I call this as a rank, right? Or a salary rank. Let's call it as salary rank, right? So if you see, if I run this, basically it gives me, it'll rank the, oh, one moment. I think looks like there is a problem with the hire date. Okay, there is no underscore. That's why it has thrown an error. Let's try to run it. See, now it has ranked it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did order by salary in a descending, means from highest to lowest it will do it. Now I need these top 5 salaries, right? So how do I get that? Basically, you need to use inline view here. These are all the things, again, we understand that in our in basically our videos, training videos, right? So I just want to pull everything again. This is an inline view concept, right? Basically, you have a salary rank. Now I want to know top 5 salaries, right? So I can just say salary rank is less than or equal to 5 or less than 6. Anything is fine, right? Now, if I run it, I get the top 5 salaries, right? So this is basically, now the thing is, these two, Scott and Ford, both are earning the $3,000 salary, $3,000, but they get the rank as 2, and then the next rank is skipped. Basically, rank function skips the next rank if both of them are retrieving the same salary. To avoid these kind, you can actually go for a dense rank function. Dense rank function basically doesn't skip the ranks if the 2 people are getting the same thing. It's the same concept. Instead of a rank function, I use a dense rank. So what will happen? First, let me execute this query for your understanding. Now see this 1, 2, 2. The next rank is 3. It has not skipped it. So now I need these top 5, right? So I just go and execute it. Now this gives you the top 5 salaries within this one. So this is going to be another query like what you have with respect to this, right? So that is about your top 5 salaries in this. What are the ways that you filter? I mean, I'm moving on to the next question. What are the ways to filter the record apart from a filter transformation? Apart from a filter, I mean, there is only the way that you can actually use as a sort qualifier. Sort qualifier can be used only for a relational sources, not for a, I mean, you can filter the data only for relational sources, not for the flat files. You can always customize the query within the source qualifier, and then you can do that. In Informatica, do you have any issue with the workflow? What are the ways that you can do? I mean, this is a little big question. We probably need a lengthy answer. Let me try to do that quickly, right? Performance tuning questions, whenever someone say that, okay, how do you optimize it? What is the performance tuning? What are the challenges that you have faced with your workflow in terms of performance? For all of them, it's the same answer, right? Okay, let's try to understand how do you basically tune the Informatica workflows. Again, right? So just like the way how you have done an SQL, even this is going to be a trial and error method, step-by-step approach that you need to take and do it. So basically, I have explained in a lengthy way in my training videos, but however, I'm just going to give you a quick approach, like how do you need to answer it, right? See, basically, whenever you see the performance issues, first thing is to identify a bottleneck. Identifying a bottleneck is nothing but where is the challenge with your workflow, right? So where is the challenge with your workflow? That is something that which you need to do. When you want to identify a bottleneck, all you need to do is first step is to capture the run statistics. You need to capture the performance details. How are you going to do that? Okay, let me showcase. Let me show this. Okay, see, whenever now this session is not working properly. I mean, it is taking a long time. So what I need to do, I need to capture the performance statistics. Then I can understand what is going wrong with this, right? So one moment. No, sorry. Let me go here, config, log options. Where is this? Sorry. It's been a while that I have opened Informatica. Where is this property? Collect performance statistics. Yeah. So this is the option that you need to select, which is called as a collect performance data. When you select this option, what will happen is Informatica write all the statistics about your session execution in the Informatica session. Okay, just for a quickly, what we can do. Oops, folder is modified. Let me save it. Just for our understanding, I'm just executing this start task alone. I go here. So if you go to, okay, bad. So for some reason it is failed, but however, okay. Basically, you need to look at the read performance statistics, write performance statistics, and all of that, right? So basically, when you collect that performance statistics, it will give you a complete information about how much percentage of read time, how much time it is taking for a read, how much time it is taking for a write, how much time it is taking for a transforming the data. Whichever is having the highest busy percentage, that is where your problem is. If your read is 99% is busy, that means you have a challenge in reading a data. If a read is having a highest, write is having a highest percentage, that means you're having a challenge with writing a data. If a transformation thread is having a highest percentage, that means you're having a challenge with a transformation thread. So depending upon the bottleneck, you need to take the different steps. Okay. Suppose let's say if you have a reader issue, right? So reader is a bottleneck. Then if you're reading from a flat file, and still you have an issue, then you need to increase the DTM buffer size. Different other parameters that you can actually increase and do it. If you are reading a data from a relational table, then you need to tune the query. Again, tuning the query, it is same as tuning your SQL, right? So relational query, whatever relational table, you just tune the query and do it. If it is probably tune the SQL, I'm just covering at a high level, tune the SQL. If the writer level is a problem, then you basically, there are different options which you can use. You can use a bulk mode. You can probably drop the indexes, load the data, and then recreate the indexes. Drop indexes and load the data and then create the indexes back, right? So that is the best approach. You can actually use the utilities and load the data, like Teradata utilities and Oracle utilities, and load the data. Increase the commit interval and try. If that helps you to speed up the process, all of that can be done. So the next one is about the transformation thread. Transformation thread is basically, it all depends upon what transformations you're using. If you're using an aggregator, you need to follow one approach. If you're using a joiner, the different approach. If you're using a lookup is the issue, then you need to follow the different approach. So I have actually covered this in my labs. So basically, it's different ways that you can actually do that, right? So is there any best practice that you can call out to find out Informatica is running perfectly? Basically looking at the duration, you can understand like how much time it is taking a data and all of that. Always you can collect the start time and end time, capture the duration and see whether it is working perfectly or not. Or you can even go and look at the performance statistics and see what thread is taking time, etc. And then maybe server level issues whenever it is there, Informatica admins can understand how much memory it is occupying and all of that, you can do it. So what is difference between a union and union all? This is more like, again, a SQL query. Union and these are all set operators, right? So union, whenever you're combining the data, union all is really different thing is that union eliminates the duplicate records. Union all doesn't eliminate the duplicate records when you're doing it. So I think we can quickly take a look at this SQL query, how it works. So we'll probably take the same manager example, right? Okay, select probably the manager from employee. I'm just taking only one thing. Okay, so if you see, okay, union all, I'm just selecting the same. Just a dummy query I'm writing. There is no meaning here. I'm just trying to show you how it eliminates the duplicate records and all that. So I'm just selecting the same thing. If you do union all, right, see, there are duplicate records here. It is not eliminating the duplicate records. And if I do a union does eliminate the duplicate record. So if I go for union, see now 7698 will get only one. See, all the duplicates are eliminated. So whenever you are using a set operators, the number of columns in the query one and the subsequent query should match. The data type of column one in the each query, column two, the data types and the number of columns should match when you're using a set operator. That's a basic thing that we learned already in SQL. So that is another thing. This is another set of questions. So we'll continue to make some more videos in this series and see what can be done. Thank you. Let me stop the video.